Action, a special appropriation to the Montgomery County Public Schools FY13 capital budget and amendment to the FY13 to 18 capital improvements program, $2,042,000 for technology modernization education rate, E-rate program. The source of these dollars is federal funds. The Ed Committee recommends approval. It requires 6 votes, and I did, for the benefit of my colleagues, commit to allow a fuller conversation with respect to this item, since we really felt somewhat constrained when we had our public hearing and a number of questions were raised with respect to it. And so this is the time and place to go through that series of issues to get people to where they need to be in terms of their comfort on this matter, and let's hope that that's the case. Madam Chair, I think we should begin with you.
Thank you very much, Council President Berliner. I look forward to the conversation we're about to have right now regarding the special appropriation to the FY13 capital budget and amendment to the FY13 through 18 capital improvements program. Of course, this was taken up in committee, and because of the storm, we had the public hearing after the committee met and has given its recommendation. And since that time, there have been questions that have arisen that my colleagues want to address. So I think what we should do right now is just turn this over to you, Ms. McGuire, and sort of lay out the parameters that the committee was asked to decide, essentially, about something that really the council already did decide on, and that was in the context of the CIP discussion this past spring. The council did make some recommendations on E-rate dollars at that time, and so I would like you to just take us through what you think are the most important items for us to contend with this morning, and then open it up for my colleagues to ask the questions that they have.
Thank you, Ms. Irvin. The committee, as you said, did meet on November 5th to review this appropriation, and the committee really addressed the request in 2 areas. First, the committee did go through fairly thoroughly a programmatic overview of the request in terms of the technology infrastructure that the board has identified and is requesting, and how that infrastructure relates to the curriculum development and rollout that is going on within the system, as well as how it relates to previous and potential future technology purchases. So the committee did examine those questions again to better understand the programmatic implications and structure of the request. The committee's discussion then focused more directly on the funding issues, which of course are central to the council. And as you said, Ms. Irvin, the school system's request for this appropriation in FY13 and 14 is entirely consistent with the council's recommendation from this past spring in May regarding the CIP. What the council did in its approval of the CIP for fiscal years 13 and 14, the council did specify that because there was not enough current revenue to fully fund the school system's request, that the council would allocate the current revenue that the council felt was affordable towards the school system's request, and that in 13 and 14, the school system would be able to anticipate adding the E-rate funds on top of that appropriation for 13 and 14 only. And again, that was the council's decision in terms of how to balance the federal funding that was anticipated to be available with the current revenue, which of course, as you all remember, was in scarce supply at that time. So again, for 13 and 14, that was the council's recommendation and ultimately its approval. The council was very specific at that time, however, that recommendation was for 13 and 14 only, and that in FY15 the council would need to reevaluate its entire funding approach to E-rate and current revenue within TechMod in the context of whatever fiscal environment, of course, is presented to you at that time. So the committee's discussion about funding then really focused on that recommendation and requested that the school system affirm its understanding of that recommendation, and that this action does not indicate any commitment to a 15 funding level. And the school system did indicate that it was clear that this approach again is consistent for 13 and 14, and that if in 15 there are funding issues, the school system will need to be responsible to accommodate any future payment obligations within whatever funding is available to it. And that again was the statement of the school system at committee, and you see that noted in your packet. So again, that does represent the committee's recommendation again, consistent with the council's approval for the CIP for this appropriation in 13, which again is for the federal funding in 13. Subsequently, as you mentioned at the public hearing, there were a number of questions raised, and staff has outlined those and incorporated references to where that information is available in the committee and now the council packet on page 2 of your packet. And again, many of these issues related to the contracting, the vendor issues, and the maintenance support going forward were addressed in the committee's recommendation, but of course those were not available to the council at the time of the public hearing because of the scheduling issues that you mentioned earlier, Ms. Irvin. So if you looked at page 2 of your packet, there have been some questions raised, and again it came up at public hearing regarding the contract process that the MCPS is intending to use for this approach, and it's our understanding, and again this is referenced on Circle 11 in your packet, that MCPS intends to use one of 2 statewide contracts to purchase the system, and that these state contracts were executed by the state and by the Maryland Education Enterprise Consortium, and did go through competitive processes at those levels. Again, as far as additional detail about that, if the council members want to discuss that, certainly the school system is here to provide that additional detail. The other 3 issues that are outlined in your packet relate to the structure of how the rebates are received in MCPS. This is somewhat of a technical issue, but again, as explained here, the way that MCPS has structured and is receiving these rebates is consistent with the council's appropriation authority, and again, as certainly the committee's and council's recommendation demonstrates, allows the council to balance federal funds with current revenue through the capital budget process, and again, that's a process that the council insisted on and adopted in FY10 and has carried through since then. So this approach is consistent with the council's intent there. There has been discussion about the vendor's financial status. MCPS does have a full discussion of this, again, on circles 24 to 27 of your packet. And if the committee council would like additional discussion of that, those details are there. Finally, there was a question regarding whether the contracts provide sufficient maintenance and upgrade needs going forward, and MCPS's response there regarding the warranty and support structure is on Circle 20 in your packet. So those were the issues that were raised at committee, and again, the answers are here. If I could just make, I'm sorry, one other note that I forgot to mention. During the committee discussion, the committee did request that the executive branch respond as to whether the executive's questions, which he had asked in his transmittal, had been satisfactorily answered, and executive staff at that time did indicate that the executive was satisfied with those responses, which the school system had provided in advance of the committee's discussion, and of course were part of the committee's discussion on the 5th.
Thank you very much, Ms. McGuire, for your always excellent analysis. We really appreciate that, so I'll turn it back over to the council president at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Leventhal and Mr. Elrich have their lights on. Mr. Leventhal.
Thank you, Mr. President. I see that Mr. Bowers and Mr. Collette are both here. I don't know if they or others from the school system will try to answer my questions, so I'll just ask them to MCPS, and whoever speaks on behalf of MCPS can feel free to do it. Essie, thank you, as always, for your very thorough work, and I asked a number of questions at the public hearing, and your memo seeks to answer those. You say that the state contracts were competitively bid, and you refers to Circle 11 of the memo. Circle 11 does not state when the state contracts were competitively bid. When did that occur?
So I'll begin. Sherwin Collette, Chief Technology Officer of Montgomery County Public Schools. The 2 contracts, one, the state's Department of Information Technology, that contract expired on September 30th. In the spring, they released an RFP.
In the spring of 2012?
2012. In July, mid-July, there was a bid opening for the respondents. The contract, the successor agreement, is scheduled to take effect today. I didn't get a chance to check to see if the Public Works, Department of Public Works had moved forward with that approval.
When you say a successor agreement, the successor agreement also resulted from a rebidding process?
That is correct. The state DOIT's contract went out an RFP that yielded multiple contracts that came as a result of that. The second state agreement, which is the Maryland Education Enterprise Consortium, or MEEC, which is a consortium partnership of this university system of Maryland and the LEAs, the school systems in the state. That contract was approved by the Board of Regents, I believe it was the 19th of June. Final working on that, I believe, was occurring then. The Board of Regents, in its approval, said it would be effective as of that time, with the time that the contracting officer signed it.
This is the Board of Regents of the University System of Maryland?
That is correct.
And they're making the decisions on purchasing Promethean boards for our public school system?
So they're making decisions on a purchasing consortium buy that school systems and the universities in the state of Maryland participate in. Among the goods and services that you're able to buy are peripherals, under which the Promethean boards are classified.
Now, is the supplier of the Promethean boards also supplying all of the terms of that apparently very large bundled contract for a variety of different goods and services?
Well, they respond in a number of categories, as do other offerers. So Dell Inc. Responded, and as part of their offerings, enumerated that one of their solutions they provide is Promethean technology. You would not see, so what happens then is the MEEC contract yields discounts that school systems and the university system, universities are able to leverage, and so they provide a wide range of products and services that you can buy from that contract.
Is the MEEC consortium subject to the state's small business reserve requirements?
I'm not sure about that.
Are there any minority, female, or disadvantaged business requirements in the MEEC consortium purchasing agreement?
I'd have to look and tell you that. I don't know.
I'd really like to know that, whether we know that with respect to this decision by the council or not. I think, we've done some work here with respect to county government purchases. We have an MFD program. It stands examination, and I hope that we will be examining it. And we have a local small business reserve program, which was initiated by the county council and substantially strengthened by County Executive Leggett. Does the school system adhere to any such programs to ensure opportunities? Because my concern about these very large bundling arrangements is that they do tend to exclude small, local, and MFD businesses by their very size. Smaller businesses just aren't able to compete.
So there are two parts to that, I guess I would say. Number one, all offerers are welcome to respond, and I would say that as a state agency, the University System of Maryland would be under the state law around its provisions. Montgomery County Public Schools publishes annually a set of reporting on participation of minority, female, and disabled offerers. And having mentioned that previously, I will be sure that a copy of that annual report is brought forward. And I think that addresses it.
Just on that note, Larry Bowers, Chief Operating Officer, we have an extensive MFD program. We've met with the Education Committee in the past and briefed them on the work that we do. We work extensively with all of the agencies in the county together in terms of both our MFD program and working extensively with the Economic Development Office in terms of their small business outreach program and the support that we can have and how we can work together on that.
Doesn't it stand to reason on its face that such a large bundled contract for such a multiplicity of goods and services provides a very high hurdle for small businesses to compete, just by its very nature?
So it seems as if that's sort of asked and answered. What I will try to suggest is that we need to look at what the service or goods are, and do I, as a small business, can I compete? Do I provide those? Do I have that to offer? Nothing we're attempting to do with respect to any of our procurement activities seeks to exclude or disadvantage any participants. So I'm not sure how else I can respond to the question.
So I'm aware of at least two Montgomery County business people who are in the, and let me be very clear, I never seek to use my influence as an elected official to advocate on behalf of any specific bidder or any specific vendor, and I am not doing it in this case. I'm asking a general question about the fairness of the process. I'm aware of at least two Montgomery County-based companies that believe it could supply MCPS with interactive whiteboards that would fully meet MCPS's specifications, that believe that they just weren't in the running, that they were never taken seriously. They don't have, I don't even know if they did, I can find out more, but that the nature of this process was not sufficiently, did not provide sufficient opportunities to compete. What would you say to them? What do you think I should say to them?
I don't know who they are, so it's hard for me to speculate about whether or not their products qualify. There are a number of entities, people claim to provide services and products that do not necessarily meet the specifications. I'm not aware of, on a national scale, any local company that actually has an integrated set of solutions around interactive technologies that integrates both interactive whiteboard technology with learner response systems that integrates and uses in a way that we're able to use our curriculum. I'm not aware of that. I'm happy to meet with any of those companies that feel they have a service to provide. I just can't speak in general about whether or not they even qualify.
Okay, that's a very valid answer, but it raises another question, which is, you indicated to me, one of the questions that we're all aware of, and it's addressed in the packet, is the long-term capability of the supplier to remain in business and service this contract. And I had a meeting with you in my office a few days ago, and you indicated that this technology really isn't that complex, and that the components of it could easily be serviced by other providers, even if Promethean World doesn't survive in the long term. So I'm a little confused now if the unique nature of these devices that so specifically meet the needs for interactivity and in a complex environment, if they're so simple, then how does that relate to your confidence that other servicers could service the contract if Promethean World doesn't stay in business for the long term?
Well, first of all, I believe my response to your question, and I think it's being mischaracterized at this point. Let me be very clear again. What I sketched for you was a breakdown of the component parts of the Promethean board. I sketched both the board, the projector, the speaker components, the mount system, and what I indicated in response to the question of whether or not Promethean is available to service the equipment. What I illustrated was part of the board, including the projector. The projector is manufactured by Sanyo. That Sanyo, as best I know at this point, is going to be in business. Whether they are in business or not, I cannot tell into the future. But there is and I indicated that there was a projector promise program initiated between Promethean and Sanyo that is independent of whether or not Promethean remains in business. Sanyo will replace the projector at manufacturer's cost. Secondly, I indicated that another component to the board, the speaker systems, either our AV staff or in partnership with a secondary manufacturer, someone like Audio Enhancements, that provides some of our audio equipment connected and integrated with the Promethean, could service or replace those speakers. That the board itself, given its long-term life, the other piece, the other componentry, is the electronics pack that connects the board to any given computer. And that I indicated that my sense was that, and our belief that we could repair that, or that there were actually small businesses in Montgomery County, in the state of Maryland, who provide service to that technology right now, who could do that. That's a very different statement around the servicing of it than what I spoke to a moment ago.
I want to just clarify that, this decision is unusual in that it is rare that the county council is in the position to vote yes or no on a budget line item in the MCPS budget. As we all know, we generally appropriate the entire MCPS budget, but we don't delegate. State law provides that the school board decides the line items in the budget. Once in a while, something comes before us, and questions by community members have been raised, and I feel that it's my obligation to get a better understanding to be responsive to my constituents. Mr. Collette, did you travel to London to a conference to extol the virtues of this technology and how positive it was for MCPS?
I attended a conference in London in the fiscal year 2009, and in fact, if anybody was to review my presentation, it was not about extolling Promethean's technology. Presentations that I've given about technology and its ability, including Promethean technology, centers around a firm belief in our work that it actually is an effective way to democratize learning, that it's actually connected to our work around providing access to all of our students, no matter their learning needs, learning styles, or abilities. And it would be about that I spoke, that I would have spoken about the ability to access content in ways that may actually make it engaging for kids of all colors, all races, and it would have been an opportunity for me to actually learn. I would not have been there as anyone's pitch man. I've never done that, never will.
It does raise a question, though, about objectivity. If you are as persuaded as you seem to be about the merits of one product by one supplier, there is a valid question that elected officials should ask about whether your enthusiasm for the incumbent and your enthusiasm for the contract with the incumbent may somewhat interfere with objectivity in a fair and competitive bidding process.
Promethean didn't pay for me to attend the conference.
Who did?
Montgomery County Public Schools, and that was intentional so that there would never be a suggestion or an innuendo like this that I was somehow on the take or on the payroll for Promethean. I think that's an insidious inference. That's never been the case. My notions around the technologies isn't just about Promethean technology. In the conversation, as we seek to isolate it now, we're making it be about Promethean. Our objective around the integration of technology into teaching and learning is broader than Promethean, but we seek now to isolate it and make that be sort of a single narrative in the conversation. It's more than that.
Okay, I'll yield after this question, but I may have more questions later. Mr. Bowers, is it routine for MCPS to send its executives to Europe?
Well, over the past few years, we haven't been able to send staff to many places to speak, but occasionally we do go to different places to present. And, particularly with our winning the Baldrige Award last year, there is an expectation, quite honestly, that we do, in fact, go to various places to make presentations. And, in fact, you may know that we did receive a grant from NIST to do exactly that, to share what we've learned, to share the experiences that we've had, to share all the work that we've done in continuous improvement with other organizations.
So you anticipate some of this NIST grant will be used for foreign travel?
I don't, most of it has been locally to conferences, to different state conferences, working with other school systems throughout the country. It's a 3-year grant. So again, we do share the types of things that we've learned here to work with other school systems, just as we learn from other school systems.
Are you aware of other overseas trips taken at MCPS expense by MCPS executives?
I can't remember it at this time. I don't know for sure. Really.
Could you look into that and get back to me?
Sure.
I guess I would suggest that, traveling abroad, while it may have some merit and some benefit, I think probably isn't a wise expenditure of MCPS funds. That's my initial reaction to it. If I could be persuaded otherwise, I'd like to know more information. And if this trip by Mr. Collette was very specifically focused on this specific technology, which is a British company, I have to say I'm curious as to whether that might, for anyone, lead one to have a very special warm feeling towards the incumbent and towards a specific technology. And the questions that have been raised are questions we should be asking about every procurement in MCPS and throughout county government, which is, do other bidders, especially local bidders, have a fair chance to compete? So that's the nature of my inquiry, and I understand staff has made good efforts to try to answer it. I remain curious about whether there's an entirely objective process at work here.
Mr. Elridge.
I want to thank Essie for the information that you were able to provide, because it led me through fruitful avenues of pursuing additional information. A couple of things I want to say. If this was a MEEC contract, the MEEC was, they set no minority business goal for the MEEC bidding process. But there were 4 MBE providers identified out of the 25 providers in the MEEC process. But they did not actually set a goal in the MEEC process. I can't speak to what the state contract did or not, but I assume the state has requirements, and there may have been successful minority bidders or not. It's not exactly true. Well, before I get into that, let me say something different. From what I can tell, nobody did anything illegal, and I don't think anybody did anything unethical. That doesn't mean that the way we did this was necessarily prudent in terms of the best financial interests of the county, and it is possible to do things that are, ethical and legal and still not in the best financial interests of the county. And I think my questions kind of go in that direction. I talked with Mr. Blankenship at Meek, and there is no competitive list of prices that Meek got. There's a spreadsheet which anybody can look at. I'm also constantly amazed by people who assert all kinds of things and then at least don't even go and find out what's available out there. There is a spreadsheet on the Meek site, and it goes vendor by vendor, and it tells what discounts they offer. And some companies offer a flat discount, some companies offer a range of discounts. And among the 25 companies that qualified, Dell is, you'll find Dell there. On the sheet that Essie referenced, and I think sent all of us, the guidance from the state is interesting. The first thing it says you should buy off this contract. But it suggests secondary bidding. And when I talked to Mr. Blankenship, and I said, well, what about bidding this out? Should you bid this at the local level? And his response was flat out, yes, we recommend that at the local level for large purchases, that it be bid out locally. And I asked him, is a $4 million purchase big? And he said, yes. So his recommendation was to do that. The letter regarding Meek, which references the secondary process, which the school system can use, which is using the state contract, says that you may use the state contract, but the state contract prices may be higher than the Meek contract. And it didn't say exactly why, but it was basically a caveat saying you can use the state contract, but these prices may be higher than our contract prices. In any event, you can't find actual prices of things anywhere. And in terms of transparency, that's a problem. I think I'm more frustrated by anything than not being able to answer people's straight out questions. Did you pay too much for a Promethean board? And when people hand me documents from other states where there's a list of products and a list of prices, and I can't go back to somebody and say, regardless of how the county did it, they got a good deal. And just present them the simple, stupid numbers that resolve that. That's kind of frustrating. And this stuff ought to be, none of us in a committee or at the council should have to try to ferret this information out. This information ought to be provided on the front side of everything so people can look at it. Now, Mr. Collette and I had a conversation yesterday, and what you described to me, he didn't say you competitively bid, and you wouldn't know whether there were any other bidders, because you told me, correct me if I'm wrong, that you negotiated a price directly with Promethean World, and Promethean instructed Dell to sell the product to us at the negotiated price. So you wouldn't have known if there were any other bidders because you didn't bid it. You simply went to Promethean and negotiated what you felt was a really good price. It may be a really good price. I have no ability to judge whether it's a good price or a bad price, but it's not a bidding process. And it doesn't give other people the opportunity at local level to compete with the bid, and it wouldn't give anybody the opportunity to look at this and say, next time this comes up from bid, I know what my competition is, and I'm going to have to do better. I'm familiar a little bit with bidding processes, and people usually know at the end of the day who won and who lost, and you can figure out why they won and why they lost. So how is it that you go from, I guess, the state recommendation that secondary bids be sought to not doing that and just flat out negotiating with Promethean?
Well, I don't think that you're necessarily representing the Meek language, even what's published directly at the University of Baltimore site, and Mr. Blankenship working at the University of Baltimore the University of Baltimore being the lead university this time around in the
Right.
agreement. In fact, I had staff that participated in the drafting of the MEEC agreement solicitation for the RFP and in the review of the 41 respondents to the contract. MEEC took a very different track. Rather than enumerating prices of offerers, given the rate at which the prices shift and change, they negotiated on behalf of local school systems and the university system members discounts. The sheet you have in front of you illustrates that what's right now listed there as the contract price, that's the pricing that Dell, when they put the MEEC discount in, gets. It doesn't represent the best price that Montgomery County Public Schools could get, or any other school system, or any other university on any product there based on the agreement. And furthermore, the MEEC contract itself identifies that member institutions, local school systems and universities, have in fact the right and are in fact able to negotiate directly with the offerers. They can in fact issue a secondary tasking. They can issue purchase orders directly. If they choose to, could go through a secondary process of bidding locally. That secondary process doesn't simply have to be a local bid. It could be a request of the offerers to say, can you provide me a price? I know what your discount looks like on the MEEC contract, but we're going to give the four of you the opportunity to provide a response.
Right.
You would likely find yourself in the same place. One of the offerers on the MEEC agreement is Apple. Where else would you go to get an offer who's going to supply a variety of different prices to provide Apple products or services off of the MEEC contract? There would be one offer. In the same way that Dell is Promethean's national partner selling in this area to Montgomery County. So, as what I tried to illustrate to you yesterday was that there are every vendor in any solicitation, I don't care what solicitation it is, whether it's a request for a bid or it's an RFP, every vendor comes to the table with a preferred set of pricing. Some one vendor gets preferred pricing ahead of other vendors in that so-called open solicitation. So from that process, someone, unless they're willing to discount very heavily to buy the business, they're at a competitive disadvantage walking in. That doesn't position the requester in any advantageous position. So what MEEC allows for us is the flexibility of having pre-qualified, in the same way that federal agencies buy from the GSA schedule, and state entities and local governments can buy, and school systems can buy off of GSA. Through the MEEC or through the state contract, they've pre-qualified vendors. They've gone through a competitive process to say, if you provide these services, if you're authorized to sell them in these areas, here's your opportunity. We went through that process. We used that process as a way of negotiating with Promethean and their partner around what sort of pricing would best work for Montgomery County Public School, given what we're intending to get.
Look, I'm not questioning whether what you did was legal or ethical. I said that up front because I agree with this. But I will say, I have an email from Mr. Blankenship, and he does reinforce the idea that
I have the same email he sent it to my son.
That's good. That secondary competition is encouraged.
Can you read the whole sentence?
But not required.
Read the whole.
I said encouraged, not required. The question.
What did the whole sentence say?
There's more
It
more
says,
before and after that.
Well, Mark,
Secondary
given that-
I'll read it. Secondary competition via task order request for quotes or task order request for proposals may be issued to any of the master contractors awarded for the needed grant in the needed group. Now, I don't doubt that you can do this. The question is, in my mind, if Promethean was if Dell was the only person who could have responded, much like Apple would be the only one who could respond to Apple, then it seems to me what the school system should have said clearly, so there's no question about this, is that this was given to Dell because Dell is the only provider of Promethean boards. This is, you look at it as an internal process to you. I think George correctly puts it as this is no longer internal. This is our constituents coming to us and saying, what about this? You may be completely right. You may have negotiated the very best price of anybody getting Promethean boards and Dell may have been the only potential supplier of Promethean boards. But we could save everybody a lot of angst if those things are true, to just say it on the front side. If there are other I don't know if there are other providers of Promethean boards. I couldn't tell from the...
There are. I mean,
Okay.
CDW sells nationally. Logical Choice sells nationally.
Okay, so, but I couldn't tell that from this, so I wouldn't know whether it was the only one. All I'm saying is that Mr. Blankenship also gave the exact example you did, that local jurisdictions may choose to secondarily bid, and they may get better prices than they get off the general discount list, because that's a general discount list intended for everybody, and so some school system buying 4 boards would get the same discount as the school system to start with is buying 1,000 boards. But you may be able to go into the supplier and say, you know, this doesn't cut it for 1,000 boards, it works for 4 boards. The question is why we don't do the secondary bidding. And if we did do the secondary bidding, would you not get this price? And how is it fair to anybody else to know whether they can match your price? I mean, didn't you essentially decide that nobody would be able to match the deal you made?
I didn't say that. What I will point to is, and again, as we focus on the Promethean piece of this, the intent around the appropriation is to support more than the purchase of Promethean technology. It also is about providing wireless networks throughout all of our schools in Montgomery County. The procurement vehicle for purchasing the wireless technology was the result of an RFP done by Montgomery County Public Schools right here in this county. So the characterization, when it's so narrowly drawn, suggests that we're all about doing one thing, and that in of itself isn't even being accurately portrayed. So we actually use multiple vehicles to procure goods and services for technology and others. And oh, by the way, we're not the only agency of government in Montgomery County that uses these sorts of aggregate buys. We're not. And there wasn't any intent to in any way shadow or not position anything on the front end about what we were doing. That was never part of the conversation at the time. So what we have done is use the strategy around which procurement option works best given the nature of what we're trying to buy at the time we need to buy it. And in fact, I would go so far as to say the purchase using state-led contracts that resulted from competitive bids, the Office of Legislative Audits cited us, but 2 or 3 years ago, as a best practice for doing just that. So we to sort of narrowly say, well, you didn't do anything illegal or unethical, sort of shaves it in a way that suggests, we just skirted on this side, or that it was solely an internal process and we didn't understand our fiduciary responsibility to do the best job to get the best values. Because look, we're not getting a lot of money to do the things that we all need to do. I recognize the competition, so our real objective has to be make those dollars go as far as possible. That's what we're trying to do. I have no interest in violating any laws or creating any suggestion of impropriety. That's not what we did.
I don't think you do. That's not, the question to me is whether this should have been bid. Is there an advantage to using a bidding process at the end, or should we just negotiate, as you told me you did, straight with Promethean? I think it's a legitimate discussion for any government purchase, whether things ought to be carried out at the bid level or be done through negotiations. And I can see where vendors would be upset if they felt like you negotiated a price and other alternative vendors didn't have a chance to compete at that level. I have no intention, I do not agree with people who have cited this as an example of unethical and illegal behavior. I find that it's pretty clear to me that the state wouldn't have these processes available to you if they violated state law. That's just, on the surface of it, absurd to accuse you of violating state laws. My question is simply about whether we should bid or not. And I'm glad I've got the numbers in front of me. I guess the other issue is, can we just put stuff out early so that we don't have to listen to people who have all kinds of, assertions because they can't see anything?
Thank you. I would just remind my colleagues we have a lot of work to do. We had set aside a certain amount of time, and I had advised my colleagues that I would allow for a more fulsome conversation with respect to this because we had been constrained previously, but I do think that we have heard a lot on this topic at this juncture and should hopefully be in a position to make decisions with respect to it. Mr. Reamer.
Thanks. I wanted to ask two questions. First, not on the contracting issue, more about how the technology will be used and the possibilities that it creates. Can you talk a little bit about the implementations that are coming in terms of opportunities for parents and teachers to engage as a result of the technology that we're putting into the classrooms?
Yes, I can. So this is a small part of that. That the idea around bringing interactive technologies, wireless networks, is really aimed at a belief that we have that we see the learning as socially situated. We learn together, whether it's problems-based work, project-based work. We see the technology as facilitating opportunities to engage kids, to provide more meaningful access to content that is less about what's printed and more digital, to extend the school day in a way through the integration of our portal, provide resources so parents have access to the kinds of lessons and lesson resources that their children have in our schools, have access to that outside of school, drive a set of changes that enable us to better blend and personalize and differentiate the learning. It's going to require a significant continued set of professional development and professional learning opportunities that we have designed and learned from things we have done. We'll continue to engage teachers, administrators, parents in that process. It will enable ultimately our students and staff to be able to bring their technologies into our schools. That takes a bit of pressure off the school system in terms of what we're able to provide or are required to provide for students. So there's an ongoing trajectory around how we see learning being enhanced and supporting our continued improvement efforts in providing meaningful instruction, relevant instruction, and engaging instruction for our kids.
Great. Maybe this one is more for Mr. Bowers, but can you describe the staff development steps that are needed in order to succeed with the technology?
Mr. Collette has a team that will be working hand in hand as we roll out the technology. As we've tried to describe it, we're going to roll it out over the next 7 or 8 months, and these trainers will be in the schools working hand in hand with the teachers to provide them with the training and supports that they need. A second part of it is we have some courses that have been developed, 3 continuing professional development courses that our teachers can take on the technology to provide them with the knowledge and skills they need to incorporate it into their teaching. The third piece is that we're looking for some just-in-time learning, so some, as you know, if you run into a problem on a computer, just having something that you can just immediately go to, so developing some online training. And then we also have a training center available for kind of drop-ins for teachers. So we have multiple ways to do this, and as we discussed with the Education Committee, the other important aspect of the training is that we have teachers in schools already who are using this technology, who are very skilled at it, and can work with their peers, other teachers in the schools to help them with the implementation, and having our administrators both have the knowledge and the understanding, but also the expectations for them to work with the teachers about the utilization, incorporation of the technology into the classroom. So those are all important and different aspects of the training that will go on.
Very good. So as far as the procurement issue, Montgomery County Public Schools was part of a committee, if I understand this, that included University of Baltimore, is that UB, Salisbury University, the Community College of Baltimore County, Carroll County Public Schools, a number of the leading education institutions in the state. We helped determine what the proposal was going to look like, and then we solicited proposals. We received 41 of them, and So Montgomery County Public Schools was involved in reviewing 41 different proposals for this technology procurement?
For all the technology offerings under the
For
MEEC
all of the
umbrella.
offerings. That's pretty thorough vetting, in my opinion. And then you were able, because, is it related to the size of your buy that you're able to negotiate directly with Promethean? I imagine a lot of school districts might like to be able to do that.
That is correct. I mean, in the same way, when we go through TechMod and we buy computers, we negotiate those prices as well, beyond the discounts that are available through MEEC, or if we buy off the other state agreement.
And that enables you to get a good price. You're confident in the price, while you don't have an additional, you didn't do a specific bid on that. You are aware of generally what this technology costs, and you are confident in the price that you got. Is that correct?
We're constantly surveying and ferreting out as much information as we can to get a sense as to where those price points should be.
And the state government, as you noted, has cited the Montgomery County Public School System's process in this area, the best practice. And these are state procurement laws.
That's correct.
So the issues about minority business opportunity is relevant to state procurement laws.
In addition to which, as Mr. Bowers indicated, we have a local program and process for encouraging participation of MFDs.
And I noticed that the contract is due to take effect, when is that?
So the state's Department of Information Technology's contract, they've been running behind. The last word I got was that it's scheduled to take effect today. The MEEC agreement is already now in place.
So if we don't approve this, then there'll be some delay, further delay in the contracting process. When are we going to be able to get these devices into the classroom?
So my hope is that prior to the end of the year, we can start that process.
Start rolling them out?
For worst case scenario, January.
How many classrooms will get them this year?
Well, we have a big job to deploy them to 2,000 classrooms.
2,000 classrooms will now begin to, elevate how they use technology, engage students and teachers. Some concerns have been raised. I think you've identified those concerns, and I think you've responded to them very satisfactorily. So I will support this enthusiastically, and I thank you for your work.
Vice President Navarro.
Thank you. First, I want to thank the Education Committee, Chairwoman Irvin, and the members of the Education Committee, as well as Essie, Mr. Collette, and Mr. Bowers, for thoroughly explaining and presenting, I think, all the details, not only of the procurement issue, but also how it's going to be applied. And I'm glad that Councilmember Reamer brought that issue up, because that was one of my main questions, that we really do need to also describe how this will be utilized and why. And yesterday we heard the state of MCPS, and I think what I took away from that particular conversation is that now we are entering this 21st century, I'm sorry, I can't focus, this 21st century education world, and we need to begin to define it. And I think that this is just a small piece, as you related, to make sure that we catch up. Because, as you described, it's not just democratizing education, but it's also providing those very advanced opportunities for those students who happen to already be way up there. So I honestly am also absolutely thrilled that we finally got here. I think it's been very difficult, given the tough economic times, that we've had to tell parents, sorry, you don't have one of those in your classrooms. Issues of equity have been raised. Parents that were able, PTAs, to raise the money have been putting, some of them in their classrooms, but many other schools have not been able to do so. And I think it's important to understand that. I just also wanted to say that we are, in many ways, victims of our own success. Obviously, in the past, MCPS has constantly been asked to go around the country and the world to share our best practices. And I think we should be proud of that. Obviously, the economic situation is what it is. But we should be very proud of the fact that anywhere you go in this country, MCPS is always cited as the model and the one that we should learn from. So I am obviously very enthusiastic. I think that this is really a down payment in terms of what we need to do. Obviously, we need to look at being fiscally prudent and very responsible, and as we move forward, maybe suggestions of having some of this information up front. I think it's really well taken, as Councilmember Elridge had pointed out. But again, I think that we better get used to it, because as we move forward, I think technology is going to play a real big role in this 21st century concept that we're still trying to understand and define. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Navarro. Mr. Leventhal.
I just want to comment. I mean, I think we struggle here with the fact that the only source of answers to our questions is MCPS. We don't have really any objective third party in a position to give us advice. I've spoken with Essie, and I know she's doing the best that she can, but MCPS is the source of all the answers to all her questions. So, as with the school board itself, I think when all answers originate from one source, it's not surprising that all questions will be satisfactorily answered. I don't know whether county officials travel abroad on a routine basis. So I just don't know that we have the basis to oppose this contract. I would want to reassure the PTA leadership, who I have to assume was contacted by MCPS and urged to appear here, that there was not a question of whether we would modernize MCPS technology, but it is part of our role to ensure that fair opportunities to bid exist throughout the process, and that's been the purpose of the questions here, so that raising these questions is not the same thing as being opposed to equity in schools, and I personally resent the suggestion that asking about fairness in bidding, which is in fact an equity issue, is somehow not being in favor of equity in access to technology. There are, as we've discussed here today, a variety of ways to provide access to technology, and we're seeking to ascertain whether this technology is being procured in large part from a foreign supplier in a manner that provides fair and equitable access to local suppliers. I got to say, I don't have much confidence at the end of this conversation that it was. So we're stuck, as we often are, asking questions of MCPS. MCPS assures us that everything has been done perfectly, and then we're kind of run out the string. We don't have any other way to evaluate whether the answers we get are accurate or reasonable.
Ms. Florine.
Thank you. I have not been very engaged in this, but I have followed the issues that the community has raised, and certainly questions my colleagues have raised. And I just want to take this minute to compliment Mr. Collette. I think you've done a tremendous job of offering us with very complete and responsive information. It's very helpful and certainly I'm actually personally inspired by your commitment to the technology program and the depth and extensive the comprehensiveness of the work that you're doing. So you've been on the hot seat for some time today, and I just wanted you to know, at least some of us think you're doing a great job, and I have confidence in your responses and in your work. So thank you very much, Mr. Collette.
Thank you, Ms. Florine. Ms. Irvin, you have almost the last word.
I know that the council president will have the final last word, but let me just say I appreciate Mr. Bowers coming and Mr. Collette, and as Essie says in her packet, we believe that we've received a thorough and reasonable explanation of the proposed technology framework, and I believe that's even more true now that we've heard from Mr. Collette, and I ditto the comments of my colleague, Councilmember Florine. But I also want to speak about the constituents that we've heard referred to by a couple of my colleagues here, or whoever the community may be around this issue. I think the community we haven't heard from are the children themselves. And I like what Mr. Collette said about democratizing learning, because I think that's what this technology will do for all 150,000 plus students in MCPS. So I applaud your efforts. I've said this before in committee. I think that you have been very transparent. When we've asked you for information, you've been forthcoming with it. And, you know, we know Mr. Collette, Nancy Florine and I, or Nancy Navarro and I, we sat on the Board of Education, worked with Mr. Collette then. You're a rock star, I think, in a lot of ways, and the school system's very lucky to have you. So with that, I'll turn it over to the Council President.
Thank you, Education Committee Chair, and let me just briefly say that I too will be supporting this effort. I commend you for moving it forward. I've been on the council 6 years, and I don't recall a situation in which we had been as pointed in our questions to a member of our county government as we have today. And I don't recall a situation in which the object of those questions handled themselves in as superb a manner. So I do commend you, sir, for the grace under fire and for the comprehensive nature of your response. And like my colleagues, I am more confident than I was going into this conversation that you too seek to ensure that the scarce resources we have are spent wisely in this endeavor, and this is an important endeavor. It is time to ensure that all children get the benefits of this interactive learning sooner rather than later. So I thank all my colleagues. I think the questions raised were indeed questions that have been raised by the community and that deserve answers, and I believe we've received them. It is time to vote. Madam, it is a hand vote. In favor of the supplemental appropriation, please raise your hand. That is unanimous. See, it was